Section 12.1 is about Zachary Taylor's presidency. There's not a lot that's going to happen during his presidency. We know Zachary Taylor, before he became president, was a general in the military. Remember, he was one of those individuals that helped kickstart the Mexican-American War. And so there's only going to be a few things that's going to happen. He's going to serve about a year and a half of his presidency before he dies. So this is what's going to happen during that time period. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Wilmot Proviso. It is going to be put forth on August 8th, 1846 by David Wilmot. He's a Democrat from Pennsylvania, and he endorses Texas as a slave state. But he doesn't want any other area to come in as a slave state. He proposed that all territory gained from Mexico must then be free. It's going to pass the House, but not the Senate. But it gives those on both sides now a rallying point. So now that the South has the idea of, will future states come in as slave states or not, and the same for the North. And what's going to come out of this, what he's going to propose that will come from this, is the idea of popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty is the right of each state to regulate their own internal concerns. Basically, each side decides whether it wants to have slavery within their state or not. So for slavery, the people in a territory decided they would vote when they were admitted as a state, whether it would come in as a slave state or if it would come in as a free state. So in doing so, this is that rallying point each side needed. So the North has the ability that all future states would be free, and the South would have that as well. All future states could be slave states. Unfortunately for the South, what is unexpected for them is going to happen is every state that comes in going forward will vote to be free states. There will be one area that has some contention, and that is Kansas and Nebraska. Basically the state of Kansas, but other than that, all other groups decide to come in as free states. In the election of 1848, Zachary Taylor runs as a Whig. He has a 40-year military career. He was a slave owner, but he was opposed with its expansion. He never voted in an election before. In fact, it is one story says that it was the only vote he ever cast, and it was for Martin Van Buren, his opponent. Zachary Taylor is a firm nationalist, and so he goes up against Martin Van Buren, who's running under the Free Soil Party. The only issue on the agenda was that stopping the expansion of slavery. And since the Democrats under Zachary Taylor, they're going to support Taylor in his ideology and what he wants. Zachary Taylor has a few things that he wants to do during his presidency, and Martin Van Buren having the only one item that he concentrates on during the election. Martin Van Buren loses that election, making him a one-term president. So the next thing that's going to happen during his presidency is the gold rush. On January 24th, 1848, gold will be found at Sutter's Mill in Coloma, California. 9 days later, California will be transferred to the U.S., and it will not take very long before it becomes a state. Within a year, there's gold fever, and gold seekers are going to rush to California. That's why they're called 49ers. Between 1851 and 1855, California will produce half of all the world's gold output at that time. The effects of the gold rush were very substantial. It's going to change the outlook and how California grows itself. So when it comes to mining life, it's very much a masculine society. So the male to female ratio is very off. So in San Francisco, there are 50 men for every one woman. For the state as a whole, there's roughly 8 men for every one woman. So women had a lot of power going into the state of California. So it really balanced out the society there, because women could demand things for themselves because there were so few of them. Mostly they're unmarried men. Few want to actually stay in California. Many of them just want to get rich and go home. Unfortunately, very, very few of them, only about 1 to 2% of those who actually went to California to find gold actually had the ability to find any. It was dirty, it was lawless, very, very dangerous. Vigilante justice prevailed. There was no true law enforcement that could be substantial for the area. 1 in 5 people will die within 6 months of being in California. And that's for a number of reasons, but violence is the number one reason why they lost their life. For society in California, the Native Americans are going to lose the most. The state legislature enacts new laws. It says that no slavery is allowed in California. However, Californians could force Indians to work for just food and lodging. They didn't have to pay them. The Native American population in California is going to plummet by about 80%. So a lot of them are going to die, some to disease, some to violence. In San Francisco, it's going to grow the fastest. In 1846, they have about 200 residents. By 1852, just 6 years later, they're at 36,000 residents. Sacramento is going to grow even faster with the invention of denim trousers called jeans. So Levi Strauss is going to create the blue jeans and mass produce them, and that comes out of Sacramento. When it comes to statehood, should they come in as a free state or a slave state, there is a huge contention here. Zachary Taylor is going to encourage California and New Mexico to skip the territorial status and just come in straight as states. In doing so, there are so many people flooding into those areas because of the gold rush. They have enough people to hit that 60,000 residency mark and go straight to statehood. In December of 1849, they set themselves up as a free state. 1850, New Mexico is going to follow California, and both territories are going to send state constitutions to be ratified by the Senate. Jefferson Davis called Zachary Taylor's plan anti-Southern. The South has this fear that it will be that both these states coming in as free states would break up their control over slavery. And it really is. Threats of secession, if slavery is not allowed in California, will come from this. And really, slavery is going to be contained into that deep South area from Texas all the way to the Atlantic, in that deep South area. Very few areas outside of that area actually want slavery. Slavery is beneficial at that time in the United States because of agriculture. And a lot of other places in the country don't have that agricultural output that the Deep South has. So slavery isn't as productive. Out of this comes what is known as the Omnibus Bill. Henry Clay is going to introduce this to the Senate. The first one, California would be admitted as a slave state, would be admitted as a free state, and it will let residents in New Mexico and Utah decide whether they want to have slavery or not. It denied Texas's claim to New Mexico. New Mexico would be its own state. It would compensate Texas for debts from the Mexican-American War. And it would keep slavery in Washington, D.C., but abolish the slave trade there. They would adopt a new fugitive slave law. This is the addition that will get southern states to and southern individuals to vote for the rest of it. And it would deny congressional authority to interfere with the interstate slave trade. Now, this will all be produced to the Senate as one giant bill. And there are pieces of all of this that various people didn't like. And if you don't like one part, you can't just vote for all the rest and say no to that. You either have to say yes or no to the whole thing. And so it doesn't take very long before a debate rises. There are extremists on both sides of the debate. John C. Calhoun will reject the compromise, saying that slave owners have the right to take their property into new territories if they wish. Daniel Webster blames both the North and the South, Northern and Southern congressmen for the crisis. Says in the Constitution, it states that they must cooperate with recapturing slaves. But it also says secession is wrong. Daniel Webster does not agree that if a state breaking away from the country. William Seward of New York will encourage his people to ignore the fugitive slave law if it is passed. And Zachary Taylor was so focused on just getting California, he lets the bill fail. So the omnibus bill just falls to the wayside. Various people in the Senate don't want to pass it. Zachary Taylor is ignoring it. So it kind of falls to the wayside. So before anything major could happen, though, Zachary Taylor dies. On July 4th, 1850, Taylor suffered sunstroke at an Independence Day celebration. On July 9th, he died of gastroenteritis, so that's massive heartburn. There is reports, possibly, that he was poisoned, and because of how he was going to respond to various things that were happening in Congress. But this is just a rumor that is out there, so you know, if you're a history buff and you read about it, that's out there. But there is no real, true, solid evidence that this is a thing. But that is out there, that they're investigating it today. So after Zachary Taylor's death, the next thing happens is Millard Fillmore is going to become president after him. And that is in the next section.